This is a surprise.
The nice kind?
Get out, Raven. I want to go to bed. Maybe in a few years.
How about now?
I prefer the real Raven. I said the real Raven. Perfection.
Yep, that's me.
Yep, that was them. That was the perfect Detroit Lions and Jared Goff. Jared Goff, who was 18 for 18. Something that a quarterback has never done, especially on Monday Night Football. He also was a quarterback who, in case you didn't know, had more receiving touchdowns than incompletions. Something a quarterback has never done. And what's crazy about that is that he only threw 18 passes. They put up 42 yards, which 42 is the answer. And I have an answer for you. We were not prepared. And that's what my whole show is about. First Kick Seahawks, the show where we prepare you for the first kick of every play by game day. And Mike McDonald and company did not get this defense ready. Did not get this defense ready at all for that Lions team. I slept for 19 hours. I do have myalgic encephalomyelitis. But on top of that, I have had COVID for the last few days, which is why I have not been here. So if I sound a little depleted, it actually has nothing to do with that game. If you watched my preseason prediction show, you would know that I predicted that we were going to lose this game. I predicted that we were going to start out the season 3-1, losing to the Lions as we head into this Giants football game later this upcoming week. That was not a fun. Well, let me rephrase. That was a really fun football game. We saw a lateral pass on 3rd and 16. We saw Kenneth Walker do Kenneth Walker things, including do a double flip to get a first down, which was bizarre. We saw Geno Smith throw over 50 times, which was also expected, but also bizarre because the guy on the other side only threw 18 times. We're going to go over some of those stats today. Please like the video. Subscribe to First Kick Seahawks. Buy me a coffee if you would like to support the show. That would be nice. A coffee would not feel well in my stomach right now because, again, I am dealing with COVID. We will see how well I can do on this stream right now. I took some anti-inflammatories and such to help get me through this show. But I don't think I even shared the link to this. That's how well I'm doing. Let me share the link really quick on Twitter. If you are watching on Twitter or on some other, social media site, feel free to join in the chat. People who join in the chat, it's always fun to see you all. But I want to talk about the usual. We have talked about this many times. But I follow the true turnover differential, which is a thing I do to determine how well we did in games and how well the other team did against us. Seahawks, we scored 29 points. Lions, they scored 42. So you might think with them having a perfect rating, well, first of all, holy crap. Courtesy of That Good Sports, Brandon Perna, Broncos fan, no quarterback has ever finished a game with 0 incompletions, at least 11 attempts. Jared Goff is 18 of 18 late in the fourth with 292 yards and 2 touchdowns, 1 receiving. But he did not have a perfect quarterback passer rating, which is actually absurd. So no perfect passer rating, right? How well did this team go? Well, we're going to talk about the true turnover ratio, which I like to go over. First of all, Seahawks, we had 2 turnovers. Turnovers being a fumble or an interception. Lions had 0. This is their best game for the Lions all season when it comes over to a ratio for turnovers. They've been having a 1-to-1 ratio. Either both teams have an equal number of turnovers or they both have 0, right? Which would be equal, right? This is the first game where the opposing team had more than them. So 2-0. Hidden turnovers. This would be 4th downs, or this would be, actually I need to change this really quick, or this would be punts. Let me just make sure, because I got this wrong earlier. Because I'm not feeling good. Right, team stats. 3 punts. Failed 4th down efficiency. Because one of these 4th down efficiencies also resulted in an interception thrown, the hidden turnover is nullified because it's not hidden. It was revealed as an actual turnover. If it was just a failed 4th down and not turned into an interception, then it would be an actual turnover. But because we're counting it as a hidden turnover, right, it's not hidden on 4th down. So we don't include that 4th down conversion as being a hidden turnover. It was revealed. So they had both teams had 3 punts. Which, that's the crazy thing about this game, is most games you have like 10 drives each. That's the average, is 10 to 12 drives per team. There were not a lot of drives per team in this game. Scores, including the safety, right? We count a safety not as a turnover, but as a score for the team. Seahawks had 5 scores, including that safety. The Lions had 6. So when you include the punt and when you include the turnovers, you have 5. That's 10 drives right there. 3. That's 9 drives right there. So there was only 19 drives for the entire game, which is about average, right? Like I said, there was 10, but considering Geno Smith threw the ball over 50 times, he threw the ball over 50 times. Let's get the exact number on that. He threw the ball 56 times. A lot of those were incompletions right there at the end of the game. He was like 36 for like 52 or something like that. It was something absurd. And then, of course, Jared Goff, 18 for 18. Like, it was absurd that we only had so many drives. It felt like we should have had more, which is what's most surprising about this game, is that there was so much happening in that game. And then, but the Lions kept having like these 7-minute drives. They had these 7-minute drives, but then when you look at the team stats, the Seahawks had the ball for 34 minutes and the Lions had the ball for 36 minutes when you round. So it's really surprising that the score ended up being 29-42. So scores, Seahawks had 5 scores, Lions had 6. When you follow the true turnover differential rating that I go by, you add turnovers plus hidden turnovers. So Seahawks, we had a total of 5 turnovers to their 3 turnovers. You then subtract by scores. So 5 turnovers by our 5 scores. We have a true turnover differential of 0. So we nulled out our 5 scores. Even though we put up 5 scores, we ended up making 0 progress, right? It always felt like we were shooting ourselves in the foot. It's because we were shooting ourselves in the foot. But when you look at the Lions, they had 3 punts. Only 3 punts. So they only turned over the ball 3 times. Remember, a safety does not count as a turnover. It counts as a score for the other team. They had 6 scores. What happens when you subtract 3 by 6? You get a negative. They had a negative amount of turnovers, which never happens. We had a true turnover differential for this game of our 0 to their -3, which you're not beating that. You're not beating a team that is making 0 turnovers. Remember, we're counting punts as turnovers. If they are scoring more times than they are punting, you are going to win that game almost every single time. Pete Carroll would talk about this all the time. If you have more if you have less turnovers than the other team, you are going to win that game every time. He would always mean if you can pick the ball off more or get more fumbles than they fumble or pick off the ball, then you're going to win that game most likely. But he never took it to the next level, which is punting. And so over and over and over again, he would leave it up for his defense to try to win the game when you need to let your offense actually keep control of the ball, drive down the field, and put up some points. Whether it be a field goal or what have you, the more times that you score, and there's only so many drives, right? If you have 9 drives, which the Lions had, they had 9 drives, not including the safety drive, which again we count as a score for the Seahawks. Out of the 9 drives, they scored 6 times. You're going to win that game. And sure enough, they did, right? It was a race for us to constantly catch up. We had 10 drives, because we count the safety as one of ours. And we ended up losing that game because we had a net gain of 0. And again, I'm trying to make this make sense while I have the flu. And I feel like I'm going to lose my gut. But I'm not losing my gut because of the game. I'm losing my gut because I have COVID right now. The Seahawks picked up 38 first downs, including first downs by penalties. That is the most first downs ever for a losing team in NFL history, courtesy of field goals. Y'all, sometimes the best way to win a game isn't clock management. It isn't running the ball. It isn't throwing the ball as many times as possible. It's just making sure that you don't punt the fucking ball. In fact, there was this one play in particular. It was we were at like the 50. We were at like their 45. And it would have been like a 60-yard attempt or on 4th down. We just needed to pick up about 8 yards. Just about 8 yards. And at the time, I want to say Gino was like 6 for 10, and he had like 61 yards passing. So he was averaging about 10 yards of completion. So if he completes that pass, we get a first down. If he doesn't, chances are the Lions get the ball at the 45. We end up punting, and the Lions get it at their 7, and then they proceed to drive down the field for 93 yards. And they take like 7 minutes off the clock. It was embarrassing. And that was a matter of like, put the ball on our, put it all on our defense, make our defense protect, force them to punt. I understand the logic, except for one thing. We're already on their side of the field. I would much rather have seen us attempt a first down in that situation because we have a quarterback that can make that attempt, who has already proven that he can make that attempt, and who's one of the most efficient in the game. And you know me, I prefer running the ball to begin with, but that's a whole nother conversation. And since we're already in a position where if you punt, it's not an advantageous punt. You save yourself what? Let's see. From the 45 to the 7, you save yourself about 40 yards. That's the equivalent of an arm punt. I mean, it was a solid punt by Michael Dixon. I'll give him that, right? But generally, if you have a punter who punts for 40 yards, you would say that's not a good punt. You want a punt to be about, 60 yards. Otherwise, what's the point? If you can get them to be at their 40, that's the equivalent of a good kick kickoff return? I don't know. I feel like it's more advantageous to attempt to try to convert a first down there than it is to try to just punt and hold them off, especially against a team that has already been rocking your socks. Keep the ball out of their hands. At least try to set yourself into a position to score. Or if you think that your kicker can make that kick, which apparently you do, bring out the kicker, and it's just as, you have just as much of an opportunity to make that kick as you do punting, because at the time the Lions were driving all the way out down the field. And speaking of, when they brought out Jason Myers to attempt the 62-yard kick, I was all for it, except what the fuck was that? I've seen some bad 60-yard attempts. I've seen some 60-yard attempts that are wide, that are too high, and they go wide. I've seen some 60-yard attempts where obviously he doesn't quite have the leg for it and he just misses. That was a 60-yard attempt where the guy shouldn't be a kicker because he obviously doesn't have the leg for it. What was that? That was the worst 60-yard attempt I have ever seen. And I've seen plenty of 60-yard attempts. That wasn't straight. That was super short, enough for the guy to attempt to return it. And it was to the left. It was one of those kicks where why are you on the team, dude? It was in a dome in September. It wasn't like it was freezing outside. Was the ball deflated? Like, why? Why is it that when Jason Myers came out to kick that ball, it looked like I kicked it? Why is a professional kicker and I've normally been a defender of Jason Myers, why is it that when he attempted this 62-yard kick, which I did not expect him to make, did it look like it was 15 yards short? Why is it that then on the next touchdown we made, we didn't even attempt an extra point and we went for 2 when we didn't need to go for 2? And then when we failed to go for 2, we then tried to go for 2 again. Now, on that play, the broadcaster said that's obviously a 2-point attempt that was converted. Why are the refs saying that it wasn't? And then maybe Mike McDonald got a quote, to quote Pete Carroll, a little hormonal, and then pulled a Dan Campbell and then tried to do it again, and then it was just overthrown. But that 2-point of conversion, A, should not have been attempted that early in the game, and B, definitely was completed because the shin was down, and then when the knee went down, there was plenty of blue between DK Metcalf's knee and the white line. That should have been finished. But also that Jason Myers 62-yard kick, which again, I did not expect him to actually do. I did not expect him to make it. Was a really bad kick. That was something that if I went out there to attempt, it would look like that. It would be really short. It would have no height, and it would probably be janked off to the left. That's going to go down as one of the worst kicks I have ever seen, if not the worst kick I've ever seen. And every Jason Myers hater out there, they have every right to scoff, but I haven't seen them comment on it because of the rest of the game that happened. Which is a shame, because there were some really good plays in that game. We had Kenneth Walker all-time game. Earlier in the season, week 1, we had him pick up a man, WWE style, throw him over his body. This game, we had a guy attempt to tackle him. He flipped over him, got his feet under him, and then flipped back over him, got on his feet, and then ran for a first down. It was one of the most impressive athletic plays I've ever seen. It was like something... Oh, I pressed a button. Is my stream broken? What happens when you leave the stream? Is my stream still going? It looks like it's still going. I pressed a button when I wasn't supposed to, but it looks like it's still alive. Again, I have COVID. I'm not feeling great. It was one of the most impressive plays I have seen by a running back that wasn't trucking somebody or jumping. It was just like he was doing gymnastics, right? It was something like when you send your kids to like a gymboree or something. That's what Kenneth Walker was doing. He was doing one of those. It was an incredibly impressive play. And then he just kept doing stuff where it was like, oh, well, obviously that's a dead play. And then it was like that 49ers game with DK Metcalf, like his second year, where he runs the entire length of the field and then goes up and around and whoop, it's a touchdown. Kenneth Walker did the same thing versus the Lions. They just could not keep up to him. He's just faster and just more, skippier than the rest of the team. If the defense had gotten Jared Goff to just have 8 incompletion, just any incompletion, we probably would have had a better chance of winning that game. It was bizarre. Both quarterbacks at one point were sacked twice. I think Geno got sacked at least one more time afterwards. Those penalties were timely. Notice that a bunch of the penalties came at the end of the game in the fourth quarter. The betting line spread was Lions under 4. So the Lions had to win 4 points or under. And at one point it was if the Seahawks win a touchdown and then the Lions kick a field goal, then the betting spread would be in line. And the Lions were driving down the field, and then suddenly there was a bunch of flags thrown against the Lions that were kicking them out of goal line, win the game by like 2 points. And it was putting them in field goal range in the red zone. And then there was that touchdown where the guy was just completely uncovered. And the ref is just sitting there like, and everyone was like, is he gonna call a touchdown? The guy's wide open. And the ref just stands there. And he continues to stand there. And he continues to stand there. And he continues to stand there. The ref never, ever, ever calls a touchdown. He just keeps his hands down, stares at it, and then he walks away. He stares at it like he had just bet a ton of money on this freaking Lions game at the 4 and under point spread. And then he realized, man, I can't get this Lions game to be under that. We just threw so many fucking flags to try to make sure that they kick a field goal instead of a fucking touchdown. And I can't throw a flag to prevent this. I just lost so much goddamn money. And so he didn't throw touchdown. He just fucking walked away after staring at it in the most depressed fashion I had ever seen a ref stare at it. The game smelled of tilting. But only in the fourth quarter when the game was getting close. Seahawks then, we start to drive down the field. Looks like we're going to score a touchdown. Geno Smith interception. It was not a good game for our defense. They looked like they were missing 7 starters because Julian Love did go out. As soon as Julian Love went out and Cody Bryant came in to start for him, what did we see? We saw a gigantic open hole. Jameson Williams, their receiver who's been going off all season, he went off on the right side of the field. Big block down the field. Got in the way of one of our defenders. Was a flag that was not thrown against us. And then the following drive, Tyler Lockett, he's in press. He's got 2 guys pressed up against him, shoving him within 5 yards. They call OPI against Tyler Lockett. Who's mad about that other than Seahawks fans? Kurt Warner of Rams and Cardinals fame, Zach Miller, of course, Seahawks fame, right? A whole bunch of NFL pundits are like, why do you call OPI on that? The guy's running a route. He's being pressed by two defenders who are in his way. What is he supposed to do other than stand there and let them continue to push him? It's within 5 yards. You're allowed to make contact within 5 yards. There was a bunch of really weird flags and penalties that seemed to be tilting the game this way and that way. Again, I predicted that the Lions were going to win this game. But it was another game where I'm like, man, I shouldn't have watched that game, that 80s interview with an FBI agent where he said that 26 owners are involved in NFL gambling, in sports betting. Because it felt a little bit like, okay, this team's obviously going to win. Let's see if we can tilt it to the right spread. I said this about last week with the Dolphins, where it's obvious that the Seahawks are going to blow them out, but we don't want them to blow them out. We need to get this as close to the betting line as possible, so let's finagle this thing. And then once they realized that they couldn't, then suddenly it started to look a little bit more normal. Geno Smith was able to drive down the field. And then here's the big thing. Once we got into the red zone, Geno Smith almost threw 2 interceptions, and then on like the third pass, he did throw an interception. So Geno Smith not looking so good in the red zone. To be fair, he was throwing some desperation passes, and he needs to not do that. There was only like 2 minutes to a minute left on the clock. They needed to have not wasted so much time getting down the field, and he was probably feeling rushed, like we need to do this, score now, get the ball back, and then drive and score again, and then we need to convert a 2-point conversion, and they needed to have not attempted a 2-point conversion prior, because that totally screwed the rest of what we were trying to do. We needed to just attempt, a normal extra point, and most likely we would have made that. Most likely. Jason Myers, of course, a little iffy when it comes to extra points, but, it's an extra point. It's very likely that your kicker is going to make that, but you never know. Not good, right? Not a good way to end the game. But again, when you're playing against a quarterback who is, again, perfect, absolutely perfect, and it has never happened in NFL history that a quarterback has been absolutely perfect, shit happens. Little interesting, though, that in all those years with Pete Carroll having a defense that bad, he has never had a quarterback be absolutely perfect against him. So Mike McDonald, rookie head coach, maybe showing out a little bit. Granted, no Leonard Williams, no Byron Murphy, no Uchenna Nwosu, no Benson Mayowa. COVID's getting me. No Julian Love, right? No Mayowa. Sorry, not Mayowa. Boye Mafe. Thank you. Jerome Baker was in there. There was another player that was out. No Uchenna Nwosu. No Lieutenant Yar. We were out 7 starters. My COVID is still getting the better of me. Again, I slept for 19 hours. My tinnitus is acting up. My brain is acting up. I got that brain fog that's just going so bad, but it's not as bad as that defense. That defense, tackling problems, pursuit angle problems, no interior pressure to speak of. I told you that they were going to run all over us. I said, though, that we weren't going to get 80 yards rushing. We're the first team that the Lions have given up 80 yards or more. I want to say, yeah, here it is. We had 133 rushing yards, which is 53 yards more rushing than the Lions have given up all year. That's the Kenneth Walker effect, my friends. Lions, 116 rushing yards, which I want to say is the lowest that the Lions have had all year. Part of that is because they were perfect passing. We had 6.6 yards per play. They had 7.8. A lot of our yards per play had to have come from the fact that for a while there, Kenneth Walker was just kicking ass. He had like a 28-yard rush at one point. Let's take a look at this. Kenneth Walker, 12 rushes for 80 yards, averaging 6.7, 3 touchdowns. That drove me crazy. At the end of the game, we passed like 5 or 6 times in a row, and we were up near the goal line. And like a penalty gave us more shots because of an injury. A hit against Geno Smith. And all I could think is, we've scored 3 touchdowns with Kenneth Walker already. Zach Charbonnet scored like 2 touchdowns against the Dolphins. We had a rushing touchdown, maybe 2, with Zach Charbonnet against the Patriots. We had a rushing touchdown with Kenneth Walker and a receiving touchdown with Zach Charbonnet against the fucking Broncos. Why are we not having Kenneth Walker or Charbonnet run near the goal line against the Lions when we've scored 3 rushing touchdowns against them already? Why are we throwing 5 or 6 times when we've already had 2 passes that were almost intercepted? Oh my God, now he's thrown an interception. What are we doing? I get we were trying to not run the clock out, but I'll tell you what, we had timeouts, and if you just score a touchdown, you're probably going to stop the clock. This is driving me nuts. Geno Smith, 5 rushes for 38 yards. Zach Charbonnet, 2 rushes for 15 yards. DK Metcalf, first quarterback, wide receiver in Seahawks history to have start off the season. I believe this is the first wide receiver. Maybe I misheard it. Maybe it's just in his career. But 4 games in a row, over 100 yards receiving. 7 receptions, 104 yards, 14.9 yards average. Really good start to his 2024-yard campaign. Jackson Smith in Jigba, he starts off with 8 receptions, 51 yards. A lot of little puttering screens underneath. All right. But a lot of these passes are fucking deep passes. Farrell Brown continues to show, like, why the hell did we bring him? Not a great receiver. Not a great blocker. You know who ended up being a great blocker today? Anthony Bradford. He looked all right. And it was probably because they kept rotating him in with Christian Haynes. Christian Haynes, he had like 1 or 2 plays where it looked like he was being overpowered, right? And then he ended up giving up some pressure. But he also had a ton of plays where he just shut somebody down. He had at least 2 pancakes. He had a ton of plays where he handed off a blitz and then went and picked up another guy. Christian Haynes looks great. Anthony Bradford looked like he was fighting for his job. And maybe what they're doing is, okay, Anthony, you're going to prepare for this drive. You're breaking down the tape. Christian Haynes, you're going to prepare for this dive. We're breaking down the tape. And both of these guys are just competing with each other. Right? They're just breaking down the tape. Maybe Bradford is overweight, so they're resting him for certain plays. And Christian Haynes is a rookie and underweight, so they're preparing him for these plays. It was fascinating to see them rotate. And both played differently. Christian Haynes is definitely getting overpowered on bull rushing plays. Anthony Bradford is definitely getting beat on finesse plays. But they're both performing fairly well at different things. Bradford's able to just move a man downfield. Christian Haynes definitely good at picking up blitzes and moving a guy out of the way to another blocker and then picking up another guy. Definitely good at those multi-step plays where the quarterback's getting to step 5 and step 7. If I was to look at the tape, NFL Plus makes it hard for you to break down tape on laptops right now. Whenever I try to, they say you need to sign up for NFL Plus. And I'm like, motherfucker, I already am. I think Dan Vians was having a similar problem, and they said that you need to go to like NFL Play or something, and then it will work. I need to investigate that. But Christian Haynes and Anthony Bradford had a much better day today than they did last week and the week before. So cool to see them continue to compete. Let's see. We had a couple of sacks. One was by Dariq Hall, which I guess as long as the quarterback's in the pocket, you're allowed to horse collar them down, which in an era where you're trying to protect the quarterback, a horse collar should definitely not be allowed. Other than that you're going to injure their legs, you're going to give them a fucking concussion. If you horse collar somebody, the back of the head's like the first thing that's going to hit the ground. So, I mean, good for him, right? But also very surprised that that's allowed. The ref even said no call flag for a horse collar. They were in the pocket. Surprised at that. And then Jerron Reed had a sack as well. Let's see. Nobody really had like a gigantic game. Tyrese Knight had 7 tackles and 2 assists. Tyrell Dotson had 5 tackles and 5 assists. Yeah, it was a hell of a game. Let's take a look at these Lions. Jahmyr Gibbs, 14 rushes, 78 yards, 2 touchdowns. David Montgomery, who I think used to be a Packer. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm thinking of a different Montgomery. 12 carries for 40 yards. Jamison Williams receiving. He had 2 receptions for 80 yards. He just had basically that one 70-yard reception. Gigantic. And then Laporta, 4 receptions for 53 yards. Right? Like, they didn't have a ton of gigantic plays except for that one. We couldn't get an incompletion. Just one incompletion could have swayed this game in our direction and forced them to punt. If we could have just gotten them to punt like one time, if DK Metcalf hadn't fumbled and we kept driving, we probably would have had a better chance of winning this game. Just one punt. Just don't fumble. That's how close this game really was. But because he was literally perfect, like literally perfect, that's how close we were to having this game be like, we put up 32 points, and then they only put up 35 points, right? That's how close this game actually was. Their defense, how are they doing on sacks? Malcolm Rodriguez, he had a sack. Levy, I'm not pronouncing your last name because I don't want to butcher it. I apologize. You had half a sack. McNeil had half a sack. DJ Reader had a sack. You know what's interesting? Aiden Hutchinson, 0 tackles, 0 assists, and 0 sacks. Their star player had zeros. Nothing. You get nothing. Unexpected. You know who he was up against all day? Cross. Charles Cross crossed him out with a big fat 0 the entire game. Good to see. Good to see him shut down. What did I say was going to happen during our pre-show prep? I said, well, they just got one guy. You could stop one guy. Surely you can stop one guy. Don't call me Shirley. And we shut him down. So there was a lot of good things in this game. If our defense didn't have 7 injuries, if we could just stop Jared Goff once, maybe twice, make it so they didn't have a -3 turnover differential, we probably win this game or at least take it to overtime if there wasn't just a bunch of weird shit throughout the game. And it's a game where I predicted we were going to lose in the preseason. Right? I don't know why I got so worked up. We're probably going to beat this Giants team unless we get more injuries on the defense. That Giants team is atrocious, right? They made the Lions, the Cowboys look good. But it was just so frustrating because how do you beat somebody who's playing literally perfect? The most perfect game in NFL history. How do you beat that guy? The dude had more receiving touchdowns than he had incompletions. That's some Larry Fitzgerald shit, except at quarterback. How do you beat that guy? Well, you don't, right? You just don't. So, 42 was the answer. Congratulations, Lions. It's early in the season. The Seahawks are 3-1. The Rams lost to the Bears. That's more embarrassing. The Cardinals lost. The 49ers beat the Patriots. They got a bunch of their players back. We got to beat the Giants. Then we got to get healthy enough to beat the 49ers in 2 weeks. That's going to be our next real challenge. We just need to be healthy enough to beat the Giants this next weekend. If we can do that and we can be 4-1, get our shit together on defense, continue to compete well at right guard. Kenneth Walker obviously is the answer at running back. If we can put it all together against the Giants, prove that we can beat this 49ers team and put them in their place and not have them catch up to us in the winning tree, right? We will be fine, right? It's early in the season. Let's go Seahawks. Please like the video. Subscribe to First Kick Seahawks. If you would like to support the channel and my COVID-ridden ass, you can buy me a coffee. There's a link to that in the description below. I need to go take a nap. I might sleep for another 19 hours. We will see. I'll catch you guys around.